Since this is going to be the only time you see this photo, particular photo of the Watts barn, I just wanted to point out a few things. You see there's a hog pen here, which faced into the barnyard, which was right here. And Watts designed that. He was particularly, it felt it important that the pigs be able to get out to the barnyard and root the manure. He thought that made the manure better. So it wasn't an accident that the pig pen was located where it was. And also one of his things, not only did he want the barns to be useful, he wanted them to be pleasing to the eye. And you can see that with all the architectural details that were placed in this barn, because he wanted the farmer not only to be educated, but to stay on the farm, not leave the farm. And he thought if the buildings were pleasing, that the farm family would stay there. So I just wanted to point that out while this photo was up.
Excuse me. What was the method of decimation?
Pardon?
How was it decimating?
As I didn't witness it. I had helped write the National Register nomination for this barn too. And when they found out, the trucking company found out, they decided to have it taken down. So it was dismantled is what I was told. Exactly how it was done, I don't know, but that's what I was told. So it was out on Route 11, going west of 10 here, where there's trucking companies and everything now. So that's the fate of that farm. Most of you know the background history of the county probably. The county was formed in 1750. The earliest settlers were largely Scotch-Irish. Then Pennsylvania Germans started coming in. Carlisle was laid out in 1751 as the county seat, and it was located on the Great Road West that really went southwest because it went down into the Shenandoah Valley. And of course, the county is well known for its limestone soils and its numerous springs. The largest is that big spring. And of course, north of the Connequin, the soil is not as rich. It's shale, but it still can be very much productive with the right farming conditions. Here's a map. I want to point out, this is the road that came from Harris's Ferry to Carlisle and then west to Shippensburg. And this was the center of the valley. And that enabled produce to be shipped out of the county. This is a landscape feature which I wanted to include because this is how rural Cumberland County used to look with multiple stone arch bridges. This one was on the Big Spring Turnpike. Another feature that's being lost are the dry stone laid fences along roads and separating farm fields. These were very common around Carlisle and Newhill, but many have been destroyed. This is an area too, north of Carlisle, Carlisle Springs, showing the rolling landscape there, which was still farmed well. The ag reform brought changes. A lot of the farmers in southeastern Pennsylvania felt that their farms weren't producing the way they should, so they were introducing manure, or manure was probably used, but not as extensively. And then they used lime, fertilizers, crop rotation, different ways to rejuvenate the soil. And of course, they wanted them to operate more efficiently so they could make more money and do better at farms. and do better farming. Uh, And this also meant that the barns and the farmhouses and outbuildings also had to be built that were better for the ease of labor of the farmer. It didn't reach Cumberland County until probably the first half of the 19th century is when it really, people like Frederick Watts, of course, introduced it. Here were some important dates in the county's agricultural history. By the late 1760s, there was already a market on the square in Carlisle. In 1806 was the first known fair. And these were important because it allowed farmers to get together, talk about their horses, their cattle, exchange ideas, and improve methods if possible. And in 1818, the County Agricultural Society was established. Again, they promoted animal shows, plowing matches, and that was another thing. They wanted to improve plowing methods. Another important event was the establishment of the Cumberland Valley Railroad, because that enabled goods to be shipped to Harrisburg and other places. Eventually, it went to Hagerstown, Maryland. In 1873, the Granger's Picnic was established. Again, it was an important event, and trains came in from North Harrisburg, Carlisle, bringing attendees that were in the thousands, which is hard to imagine, but people were really interested in that at the time. And another thing that showing the importance of agriculture was the market house in downtown Carlisle, where the new courthouse is now. And it brought in a lot of people on market days, made Carlisle a bustling center at the time. In 1880, the Farmers Club was established for the McCormick estate. This was mostly in eastern Cumberland County, where they owned about 30 farms. And they encouraged tenant farmers to be very careful how they farmed, to have better farming methods. And into the 20th century, then the first Mifflin Grange Fair was held, and it attracted thousands of people. And during World War II, they sold their buildings to the Carlisle Fair, and then the Carlisle Fair operated. And I remember going to the Carlisle Fair, so maybe a lot of you do too. And another important thing was the Pennsylvania Rural Electric Act, which enabled farmers to have light in their barns and easier milking took place. And I showed you Frederick Watts's tenant farm, and this gives a little history of him. In 1840, he bought the first McCormick reaper in the state. So that was pretty important that Cumberland County had the first reaper right here locally. And he demonstrated it to show that it actually did work. And he had Cyrus McCormick, the inventor, was here also. Watts was also instrumental in establishing the Pennsylvania State Ag Society. And one of the goals was to establish an agricultural school. And now that's Penn State University. He wrote up his barn design, and the barn that we saw was based pretty much on that design. His first barn at that site was destroyed by an arsonist. The newspaper account says it was the finest and most expensive in the state. But he was undeterred and built that one that we saw the year later. And he was awarded or recognized by President Grant, and he was the second U.S. Commissioner of Agriculture. This is the back of that same barn I was pointing out. You can see the ramp. This is the wagon shed corn crib built right onto the barn, which he felt was easier so that they could access the barn, have the corn up there, and the granaries were at the back of the barn, right in that area. And here you can see a drain pipe going down. There was a cistern underneath there, and it was fed, it could feed, use gravity fed to go to the front of the barn where the water trough was to water the cows and horses. So again, he was thinking about the ease of the farmer, how things could be laid out that benefited less work. This is a similar barn, which is still standing. McKeon base, it was built by the McKeon family, who were large landholders in West Pennsboro Township. You can see this one isn't quite as large, but it still is the same principle, where the wagons could go underneath. When they were unloading corn from the corn crib, they could unload the wagon right there. They could take it up into the corn crib from the ramp, but then unload it with wagons below. So again, it was to save the hands of working. And again, this is a pleasing design. It's all symmetrical, windows and the doors and everything. So it was meant to be good looking as well as efficient. This is a floor plan of it. You can see the drive-through and the granaries at the rear of each mound. There's a threshing floor, wagon floor, and this is the gable ramp extension here. And again, you could unload from the granaries too. A wagon could be pulled around there as well. Watts, of course, had the money. He was a lawyer and he inherited money. But other farmers, like in western Cumberland County, did not. So I want to show an example of the Hahn family, who they were builders and carpenters and farmers as well. And they made money by allowing their interest in the money that they made so that they could purchase additional land. This is the David Hahn barn in Hopewell Township. You can see the outshed granaries, the brick. Although it looks like they were added later, they were actually built at the same time. I have the ledger that says when they built all these. And it was, you can see inside too that it was all built at the same time. But what the benefit of these outshed granaries was that it meant that the granaries, which would have normally been in this area, were moved to the back. So it allowed more space for the storage of hay or straw in there. Again, it shows the progressive and the reform-minded farmers. This is the Hahn farmstead. This was the original house, which is log. It was encased in brick. And then the kitchenette was built to the side all at the same time. And they also built a brick summer kitchen and a brick smoke house. So again, these farmers didn't start out rich, but they invested their money and then were able to build substantial buildings on their farms. This is another barn that was built by the Hahn family. This is the Hensel Winslow farm. It's a Schweitzer barn. How you can tell Schweitzer's is the asymmetrical roof line. If you cut off the outshed granary, it has an asymmetrical roof line. And here it is too. You can see these were the earlier barns. It wasn't until later that they were symmetrical, like the Watts barn is completely symmetrical. These were asymmetrical. The forebay is almost built as an afterthought. It wasn't actually an afterthought, but the way it is constructed, when they built the standard Pennsylvania barn, the forebay was incorporated into the main structure. This is a page from the Hahn ledger showing the weeks that were spent on the barn. So there was a total of maybe 19 weeks. And then it shows how many days of that week they spent time on them. So you see the name P. Hahn, John Graham, James Shoemaker, William McElwain. As many of you know, the county's landscape has changed drastically in the last 45 years. Carlisle's retail has moved from downtown to its periphery. And part of that was the moving of the farmers market. And of course, we know the eastern half of the county is largely suburbanized. So bottom line is we've lost a lot of barns in all those areas where change has occurred. One of the things I want to point out is that Dutch traveler Theophile Casanova in 1794 noted that farmers 7 miles west of Carlisle were already building large barns. And if any of you know Route 11, about 7 miles is present day Mount Rock. And you can see a lot of the barns are still standing, and I will show you some of those here. That is in West Pennsboro Township. Well, first I want to show you this. One of the grand barns of the Carlisle area was the Noble Barn. Some of you may remember that. It was one of the largest stone barns, if not the largest stone barn in the county. You can see how many stories it is, like 3 or 4.5 stories. And then one of the lesser barns was the Kiner Barn, which was in North Middleton Township, north side of the Connequina Creek. But it shows how many of the barns would have looked like in the 1790s and early 1800s. And so I thought it was important to illustrate that. And here's about 1800 barn. Maybe some of you are familiar with it too. It's right along Route 11 also. It no longer has its mail pouch sign, but this was the barn built for the Jacob Palm Tavern. And that may explain why this is so narrow. They needed a lot of stabling, but they didn't need a lot of hay storage, so it's not as big this way as the typical barn. And this is another barn in West Pennsboro Township, the Kerr Base Barn. It's stone and timber frame. You can see the rear stone wall, and why it doesn't have an eastern stone wall, I don't know, whether collapsed or what, but now it's just timber frame. But the west gable was still stone. And it has the single outshed granary to the rear. But here you can see how steep that roof is. It's another Schweitzer barn. It has that steep pitch. This is another barn in West Pennsboro Township, Lefevre Settle Barn. It has some interesting details in the interior. This is called a gunstock post because it flares out at the top. It also has the tapered and canted purlin post. So it's another interesting early barn because it shows up in the 1798 federal tax. And this one's right next to the Big Spring High School, the Jacob Myers barn. You can again see you can see the steep pitched roof, asymmetrical, has a single outshed granary there. And this is the farm where supposedly Rittner worked, and then he met his wife at the Lefevre barn. He met his wife there, these farms are adjoining farms. So that's just a little tidbit of local history. So I got a lot of my information from old ledgers. I'm a McElwain descendant and a Brown descendant. And so I inherited some of that. And through that, I can learn who built the barns, when, and as my ancestors, Andrew McElwain Brown's barn, you can see Jacob Allison was the mason, the stonemason, and William Boyd was the head carpenter. But another way that you can learn about barn builders is through mechanics lien stockets, which are at the Cumberland County Archives. And so I learned more about the Blozier family. They were barn builders for a long time, and they were in the Blozierville area, Frankfort Township. This is my great-grandfather's barn. You can see that it's a little unusual with the cantilever at the back, but it provided protection for the barn doors because there's a strong wind from the northwest. And it also allowed a little bit of storage. When I was a kid, the corn shocks were stored still there from my grandfather's time. And as kids, we used to crawl around up there. But again, it was a feature that was to help provide more storage for the barn. This is one of the barns that Solomon Blozier built. This is at McCray, the village of McCray. You can see there's a little date stone, 1894. And I was able to find through the newspapers here that William McCray was a county commissioner. And so when they had the barn raising, they had a big party, and it was in the paper. So it said about them coming here and raising the barn in 1894. And there you can say CJ, the son was John McCray, and he put his initials on the granary. So these are some of the barns that we saw last year. These were chosen to illustrate some of the points I made about investing. Jacob Plank patented plows. He lived near Churchtown, and Then he invested that money, he bought another farm, and he built this barn in 1854, a brick-in barn. Again, another substantial barn. So you can see in this barn, there was that additional space for the storage of grain or wheat. And as you might know, log barns are scarce in the county. When we were doing our survey work in the late 1980s, there were at least 4 or 5 barns in Frankfort Township alone. And now there's only one survived, and it's just hanging on. This is the barn in Monroe Township. It's unusual because it has corner posts instead of the regular usual V-notch logs is what you traditionally see. And it has these supports along the sides. I know there are other log barns, but my point is they're increasingly rare. And I told you about the Farmers Club, which was established in 1880. And this was one of the farms. This was a long time tenanted by the Bayshores. It's the only operating farm in Hampton Township now. It's completely surrounded by suburban development. And it operates as a farm market. The barn burned in 1935. It was struck by lightning, and the McCormick's had it built on the traditional plan, using at least part of the same foundation. The McCormick's, when they got out of the farming business in the 1940s, the Bayshores were able to buy their farm. So the McCormick's always treated their tenant farmers well, and this is evidence that then they were able to purchase the farm. Another farm that was featured was the Brant Coik Farm. This one's located on the Big Spring, on the west side of the Big Spring. Some of the features that you can see are this is what's called a retracted outshed granary, because it's now part of the main barn. It's not separate or it's not extended out like the other ones, like some of those that I had illustrated. But again, it did provide that additional storage. Another barn that we saw was the Blaine Mill Barn. The Blaines were in the milling business, and they were able to, again, add features to the farm that was associated with the mill. They built a frame barn instead of a log barn, replaced the log barn. They built onto the main house and built other outbuildings. So they used their money once again to improve the farm. You can see it's unusual because of the ramp goes in the gable end. And of course, that meant different framing than usual. So I would imagine it costs more than the usual barn too, because of its detailed framing. And the forebay is along the long end. Here's a view of the forebay. It was enclosed around 1950. Another interesting detail was the barn doors opening out with ventilators beside them. Again, it was classic symmetrical positioning. And this one just had a single granary in the corner. No evidence of a granary on this scene. And again, you can see the doors. These doors were to let air in when they were threshing. This is probably one of the barns you've seen on the way between Newville and Shippensburg. It was what I would call a showcase barn. And many of the late 19th century barns had ventilators, but they don't survive much today. There are some barns, like the McCormick barn, has those ventilators also. But the barn burned around 1913, and this new one was built. And one of the other interesting features about it is its height. It's higher than most barns, and this meant that it had to have a little different framing up there. There was an extra crossbeam and canted purlin posts. So I probably threw out some terms that aren't familiar with, but I just realized that when I said canted purlin posts, these are canted, they're angled, and they support the purlins on either side. And they were usually mid-roof to support the roof because there was a lot of weight on these large roofs. So it was one of the reasons why that was done the way it was. So some of the conclusions that I've drawn are that the fertile limestone soil of the county enabled the construction of large Schweitzer type barns by the late 18th century. Especially, you can still see them in the Newville area. Frederick Watts led the county's ag reform movement, principally from 1840 to 1870. And although he's largely forgotten now, he was really important in the 19th century. And the Historical Society has a silver pitcher, which was presented by the farmers to him in recognition of their appreciation for his work. He's, like I pointed out, he tried to make a better farmstead layout so that farming was made easier. And one of the ultimate goals was for higher crop yields, greater profits, and progressive farmers use these profits in constructing more substantial and efficient barns and outbuildings. And that was shown like in the Hahn farm and the McCormick's. And again, Jacob Plank was a plowmaker, and he invested his profits in a better farm too. And like I pointed out also, the McCormick family promoted a farmers club. And I didn't explain everything about that, but there was notes there that every so often, every couple months, they would all get together at one of the tenant farms. They would have dinner, and then they would have like demonstrations of plowing, thrashing, fence making, all those kind of things, so that the farmers could learn how to better run a farm. And of course, I pointed out the Hahn brothers, who had poorer land, this shale land, but they also were able to build substantial buildings of brick, stone, so that they could have better farm buildings, more attractive and more efficient. So basically, that's it.